Okay, are you seeing an agenda in front of you with a bunch of green highlights on people's names at the top?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I would like to be able to see you all while I do this. There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody. Really appreciate you being here. There might be some folks rolling in as we get going. Corinna, if you can keep an eye on that, let people in as they knock on the door. This is the very first committee meeting of System of Care Advisory Council's new Program and Policy Committee. It is taking place at the same time as our state agency standing committee used to. So today is going to be a little bit of like blah, just being talked at. Of course, there'll be a lot, ideally, some dialogue. But basically, what we're doing today is describing what is this committee for? What is each of us here to do? You'll each be asked to introduce yourselves and sort of the primary lens that you're bringing to this conversation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we'll go over the charter and talk about some ways that we want to prioritize. And I may ask Ebony to step in a little bit there because she does that sort of clarity piece really, really well. So we'll use our strengths and lean on her. And then we'll sort of really start digging into the meat of the work in the next month and the months following. So bear with us today. We're doing more of an organizational meeting, but I do hope that part of that looks like y'all getting to know each other a little bit and figuring out how we'll share roles and responsibilities here so that this complicated work that we're here to do, we understand none of us are here to do it alone. And all of us know things that other people in the room don't. So I would typically go around and like take attendance and we would like mark a little like, yes, they were here and they were not here, right? In these boxes here. I don't maybe you can in these boxes here. But because I don't have the Word version of it in front of me, I'm not going to do that. And Corinna's just going to note that. We'll go through introductions in a minute, so we don't need to like call everybody out quite yet. But one of the things that we have decided to start with all of our System of Care Advisory Council committee meetings is the group agreements that the full council uses. So these are the group agreements that our council uses, and if we decide that we want to change them for the subcommittee, we do have the freedom to do that. But for now, we're going to operate under these shared agreements, unless somebody wants to say, blah, I hate this. First of all, we try to do our best to be present and participate. For many of us, that looks like keeping our cameras on. For some of us, having camera on is actually really distracting and makes us feel uncomfortable. So if the way that you are most present is with your camera off, that's okay, right? It's ideal if you can let me know via like a private chat that that's why your camera's off, so that we can be supportive of that. But if that feels like awkward or weird, then don't do it. Participation looks like commenting in the chat. It looks like speaking up and saying what you have to say. It looks like nodding or facially expressing yourself. Because of this weird Zoom experience, we don't always get the feedback we're used to in in-person conversation. So maybe going a little bit, being a little bit more intentional about showing people that you are listening, that you agree, or that you have a different way of looking at things can be really helpful for some folks in this space, for whom Zoom meetings are actually like anxiety provoking. Any questions on what being present and participating means? Again, I know we're not in kindergarten, but we're going to listen actively and respect others when they speak. Avoiding interrupting is pretty easy when you're working in an online environment, but we also do in-person meetings. So sometimes people just get real excited about the topic and they just want to add on and do that kind of layered talking thing. And for some folks, that feels like shutting them down. So just wait until somebody's finished. And if you screw it up, say you're sorry and we'll move on. We do our very best to avoid acronyms. There are a lot of different perspectives in this room, and acronyms mean different things to different people. And I once read a study that when people use acronyms, like most people don't feel comfortable asking for clarification. And so you lose up to 60% of the understanding of the conversation when people don't define what their acronym is. So if you're saying, we're talking about EPSDT today, somebody, probably me, is going to call you out and be like, and what does EPSDT stand for, please? And then you'll have to call out and say, that means early and periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment. Or if you don't even know, that's okay. Somebody can Google it and we can put it in the chat. Varied and opposing ideas are welcome. This is hard work. This is adaptive work. There is not a clear answer. If we had the clear answer, we would not be here. So we are all here because we have different perspectives and we see things from different angles depending on where we sit within or outside of the system. So instead of demonizing one another or feeling attacked where there's disagreement, what we're really trying to do is hear all of the different ways that people experience whatever the topic is and hold space and understand that that's true. If Courtney's truth isn't my truth, that is okay. I sit in a very different place in the world than Courtney does. So it doesn't mean that somebody is wrong. It means we just have different perspectives. Does that make sense what we mean in terms of like challenge ideas, not people there? Okay. Use the names and pronouns people used to introduce themselves with. Now that we're in Zoom, it's a little easier. You can put your own name, you can put your own pronouns in there. But that is one way that we demonstrate respect is that we call people what they like to be called in the world. We honor those with quieter voices. So if you're somebody like me who likes to talk a lot in meetings, take a beat, give that quiet pause for a second and see if somebody else will step in first, maybe somebody who's quieter. If you're somebody who doesn't speak up as often, try and challenge yourself and lean in a little bit and see if there's something you can contribute. If it's comfortable in the chat, if it's more comfortable in person, that's fine. But you're here for a reason. We actually invited each one of you here because you have a specific perspective that we want to be a part of the conversation. So I would hope that you have something to say and you feel comfortable speaking up. We avoid problem solving for individual situations or crises. This is not a case consultation kind of space. If people do need a case consultation conversation, we'll follow up with you after the meeting. But we really are not here to talk about one child, one case, one specific instance, which is because our purpose is system work, improving the system of care in Oregon at the systems level. Be mindful of power dynamics in the room. Each one of us has authorities and power that others of us don't have in the room. It can be really great to say that as a person who works in agency land to people who are here primarily representing lived experience. But the reality is that people who work for agencies or people who work for providers are seen as having a lot more power in the system than people who are coming to this table to represent lived experience. And so being aware of that reality and doing the things that we can do to create space is necessary. A lot of agency folks sometimes feel defensive when folks are complaining or naming barriers or challenges that they've experienced in the system. And that is real. It happens in your body. It's not something you can totally control. And let's try and take a breath when that happens and not defend, but really try to listen and hold on to whatever that concern is, because defensiveness often sort of shuts down that sort of open communication. Does that make sense about what I'm trying to say about power dynamics? Awesome. And then whenever possible, propose solutions, right? We are very good in Oregon and probably all of the world at really understanding what the problem is and naming the problem from all of its different angles. And we admire the problem a lot, but throwing out ideas for how to solve the problem is really what we're here to do. So if it's not the best idea anyone ever had, it might start the ball rolling to get us to what that best idea is. So again, you're here because we think you have good ideas. So please feel free to share them. Questions or concerns or comments about like this one is really important to me. I know a lot of you in this space don't know each other yet. Thanks, Nate. Nate in the chat says, feeling good about these myself. Okay. And then with quick grounding in the values of the System of Care Advisory Council, which is what our whole strategic plan focuses on actions that center children, youth, and family. They are the reason we all do this work. On the work to increase awareness of behavioral health challenges, mental health challenges, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and to reduce the stigma around seeking support and getting services to live a good life when you have those experiences in your life. To promote sustainable change, so really thinking about what's doable and durable as we continue to propose solutions. To prioritize to the greatest extent possible community-based care, which doesn't mean if a young person needs high acuity services that we have failed, but we definitely want to get them access to that community-based care as soon as we can. And to advance equity by promoting accessibility, affordability, and quality. And on your agenda, on your PDF. When you click on Advance Equity, it should take you to our equity policy and our equity tool that we have created. Um, and so we actually will be digging into using that tool in the future to figure out, make sure that we're not forgetting about our equity values as we continue through this work. So that procedure is available on our website. And we're not going to go into it in detail here right now, but I want you to know what it looks like. And it looks like this. It's a couple pages long, and it's really just questions about priority populations, different involvement, intersectionality. The link on your PDF isn't working. Okay, Leah, I will send that link out in the notes after the meeting so that people have access to it. Okay, so that was the end of sort of the beginning of meeting ritual work. Now, if we can introduce ourselves, and if we can just call on the next, what if we do the raise your Zoom hand thing? And then once you've talked, your hand comes down, and that way we don't forget anybody. So everybody quick, raise to your Zoom hand. Or go slow if you are like a, I don't want to talk in public kind of person. All right. Leah, would you start us off by sharing your name, pronouns, primary lens that you bring to this council or to this meeting, and one group agreement that you're excited about, like you know you're gonna nail it.
Okay. So I'm Leah Tucker. I am or I am a um, family rep and she, her pronouns and a group agreement.
I'll paste them in the chat so you have them
I don't,
in case you haven't memorized them all.
I totally have. So I just gotta choose one, I guess. Probably the varied and opposing ideas are welcome. That's gonna be one that's probably like real easy for me. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Cody.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Cody Welty. I'm a research analyst for Oregon Health Authority, but I'm assigned to the System Care Advisory Council. And so I function basically as the staff research analyst for SOCAC, or System Care Advisory Council. Use he, him pronouns. One group agreement, we'll go with think I know I'll be good at demonstrating instead of no. Certainty is always tough and I will make mistakes, is the acronyms. I try really hard to avoid them and I will be doing my best.
Awesome. Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Reese. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the executive director at FACT Oregon, and we are a nonprofit that supports families and individuals with disabilities across the state. We are the Parent Training Information Center, or PTI. So we support families, particularly navigating special education. And we're all parents of youth. Some of us have young adults now that experience disability. And so that is the lens. And I think I will be also I think I'll be working well in the varied and opposing ideas are welcome.
Excellent. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
Corinne.
Hi all, I am Corinne Hale. My pronouns are she, her, and I work with Columbia Pacific Coordinated Care Organization. And a group agreement that I will also, I believe, feel really good about varying and opposing ideas. It's something I love. I love having lots of different ideas to work with. So really appreciate seeing that in the group agreements.
Awesome. Thanks, Corinne. Debbie?
Hello, my name is Debbie Martin. I'm the interim government relations manager for the Oregon Youth Authority, which means I work on legislation and public relations. I use she, her pronouns. And I think for me, a group agreement I that reminds me the most of what I need to do is to be mindful of the power dynamics coming from a system perspective and somebody that has a fair amount of privilege in this world. I just need to be mindful of that in these spaces.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Debbie.
Mhm.
Monique?
Hi, my name is Monique Turner. I use she, her pronouns. And I think it's really hard for me to find one lens because I tend to operate in a multiple lens world. But I'm coming here probably primarily as a child and family therapist. And one group agreement, I love the focus on the purpose of improving the systems of care in Oregon.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Selby?
Hi, my name is Selby Stebbins. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the System of Care Specialist at Health Share of Oregon. Though sometimes you'll hear me refer to myself as a System of Care Coordinator, so I'm here trying to bring in the perspective of our local System of Care Collaborative for Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties. And I, like similar to Monique, I love thinking about systems change and how to leverage this framework and the ideas behind it in service of our kids and families.
Awesome. Glad you're here. Nate?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nate Latanzio. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a Youth Advisory Council Coordinator working at Youthera. I'm formerly a training specialist for youth peer support specialists. And I would say for the group agreement, probably propose solutions. I like to think I'm pretty solution oriented, all about that creative problem solving and not just staring at the problem. I want to do something off of it. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Nate. Lacey?
Hi, all. I'm Lacey Andreessen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the deputy directors for child welfare. And one of the dynamics that I did not understand coming into this position with that title for this organization that I deeply understand now is similar to what Debbie shared, the perceived power dynamic that I have both professionally and personally, where I carry a great deal of privilege. So I will commit to continuing to remember that in working with this team.
Molly?
Hi there, Molly Haynes. I use she, her pronouns. My lens or expertise is in my role as the Director of Health and Education for the Oregon Health Authority. So I play an alignment and liaison role with the Department of Education for all things health at OHA. And I like the avoid problem solving for individual situations or crises. I like this making sure we stay with the collective focus for what's gonna move the dial the most holistically. Thanks.
Thanks, Molly. Jesse?
Hi, everyone. Jessie Egan. I use she, her pronouns. I am the manager for the Child and Family Behavioral Health Unit at OHA. I probably will be here sort of interchangeably for Chelsea Holcomb, who's our director. She and I tend to tag team. She is not here today, so you get me. I was trying to choose one. I think I'm okay at several of these, but I also tend to be someone who speaks up in meetings. And so I'm going to try to honor those with quiet voices. So I will lean back and make space. So
Thanks so much, Jesse. Hillary?
Hi, Hillary Harrison. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm part of the Child Family Lifespan Behavioral Health team, and I'm the policy strategist on the team and responsible for a lot of the system of care work. So my role here is to be supportive of the behavioral health team that are here, and I love proposing solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Courtney?
Hi, I'm Courtney Esparza, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health for Trillium Community Health Plan. And I'm also going to go with the solutions because I love solutions, innovation, and especially kind of the group think around solutioning. So excited for that piece of it.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Ebony?
Hello, everyone. Ebony Clark, Behavioral Health Director for OHA. Pronouns are she, hers. And I will go with stay focused on our purpose. I think that there's a lot of intricacies and interconnections to all that we do in this table, and it's easy to kind of start, blooming out, and then it makes it feel almost impossible from my perspective, to feel like we can land a recommendation or be effective in, what we're charged with doing. And so I think that helping us stay focused will help us be able to demonstrate accomplishments.
Excellent. Awesome. Lydia.
Hi everyone, my name is Lydia Fluker. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Continuum of Care Coordinator on the Treatment Services team within Child Welfare, and our team supports a variety of efforts for youth with complex or specialized needs within Child Welfare. And a group agreement that I feel like I can stick to is that, apologies, I'm sick, is the acronyms piece. I'm frequently the one asking folks to explain acronyms, so I think I can continue to honor not using them in ways.
Excellent. Thanks. Solace, you available?
Yes, I am. Hi, Alex Solis, he, him. I am a former long-term bureaucrat turned private consultant, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to challenge myself on not using acronyms for anybody's work with me. That's a difficult one for me. So I'm excited to give myself that challenge, and pleased to be here with everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And Anderson, I put the group agreements back in the chat for you. I bet you can recite them in your sleep, but we are also saying name, pronouns, and primary lens that you're bringing to this table.
Yeah, so Anderson Du Bois, pronouns he, him, his, Director of Strategic Initiatives with REAP. My video looks like it's frozen, but hopefully you can still hear me.
We can.
And I can focus on solving and focusing more so on the purpose and grounding in that. I'm very much a context person, and so I can keep that centered in the work. Sorry, I'm coming from a coffee shop, so they're playing Common right now.
It's a good problem to have. REAP. What is REAP, Anderson?
REAP is a youth leadership nonprofit organization that works in about 9 different school districts, 5 counties, and about 20 schools across the state. We work with about 5 different statewide youth councils, with various Oregon Health Authority councils, as well as with ODE. And then as well, we are working to provide peer support services for the SOCAC's affinity groups. So that's a quick shout out for that, and I can put information in the chat for our website.
REAP is awesome. So yeah, feel free to dig in and learn more, Debbie, or any of us. And Sonia, I believe you are the only one of us who has not yet done your intro.
All right. Hello, Sonia Little Deer Evans, and I'm the Deputy Director for Deschutes County Juvenile and the SOCAC rep for Oregon Juvenile Department Directors Association. My pronouns are she, her, aya, and I think the one that resonated with me today that I know I can do pretty well is just honor those quieter voices and make sure there's space for quieter voices.
Thanks so much. Did we miss anybody? I feel like I heard you all. Oh, Corinna, you have not introduced yourself, ma'am.
Oh, yes, sorry. Hi, Corinna Hazard here, she, her pronouns, SOCAC staff, operations coordinator. So I'm in the background trying to make sure we're letting everybody in and getting those links to you. Thanks.
If things go well at SOCAC, it's usually Corinna's fault. And I'm Anna Williams. I use she, her pronouns. I am the executive director at the System of Care Advisory Council, and I am very good, or at least very attuned to the acronym issue. And so if I accidentally use an acronym, I will check myself. And if you do it, I will check you too, in a spirit of love and understanding, that I want everyone to know exactly what you're talking about. So like somebody did, like Debbie just did, what is REAP, right? That's really helpful. Just asking in the chat. If you don't get something, you're probably not the only person in the room that doesn't get it. So if you can be brave enough to just ask, that's like actually a service to the other folks in the room. Okay, so now we're gonna move on, unless there's like other questions or comments about like getting to know you, to our charter. And that is in, well, was not in your email. Corinna, can you put it back in the chat for the folks who have stepped in here since we put it in earlier? And I will pull it up over here. I don't know why it has that weird box on it, but we're just gonna live with what's in front of us. Okay, are you now seeing the charter? It's like a white document with a sort of a tealish bar down the left-hand side.
Yes.
All right. So one of the things that we heard when we spent the last year, 2025, doing System of Care Advisory Council strategic planning was, let's be really clear about what we're doing in which spaces and how we're doing that thing. And so we used a charter process to come up with the definitions of what the different committees are actually supposed to be doing, so that if something comes into our space that doesn't fit within the charter, we have an easy way to say, sorry, that's not us. One thing I've learned about system of care work is that like everything in the world feels like it could be system of care work if it has to do with children. And to some extent it is. And if we try to solve every problem all the time, we've actually solved no problems. So to Ebony's point, the charter should help us really stay focused and intentional about what we're here to do. So the Program and Policy Committee charter, we'll make sure you all get a copy of this. I'll email it out to everybody after. So the System of Care Advisory Council has a strategic plan. Corinna, maybe you can put that in the chat too. So we're going to focus on implementing the activities in the strategic plan that are specific to program design and delivery, staffing and training, policy and legislation. And when I say policy and legislation, I mean all sorts of policies, big P policy, little p policy, rule advisory committees, provider handbooks, right? Like all of the things. I think what we had previously kind of gotten hung up, one of our committees was called the Legislative Committee. And we only talked about legislation in there, but there are lots of policies that are barriers and lots of policies that can help us solve problems that aren't just changing laws. So we're sort of actually expanding scope with regard to what types of policies we're looking at here. And then access to specific service types, which exist across systems. So like DD provides certain types of services, or the developmental disability system provides certain types of services that are only available to people that screen into those services. If like a respite service for a person with developmental disabilities might actually be the best service for someone with a mental health challenge, we want to talk about, is there a way to make a bigger door into that service type, and what would be the risk and benefit of doing that, right? Like that's just an example when I say access to specific service types. Our job within everything we ever do at the System of Care Advisory Council is to use an equity lens. And so that's that equity policy that I mentioned to you earlier that we'll need to dig into in a future meeting, or maybe we'll get time to do it today. And a service delivery, and talk about service delivery, like how is the way that we're doing the work actually bringing in youth voice, bringing in family voice, understanding what it is that they want from our services and supports, and then being as responsive as we can with how we deliver those services. So when we're talking about centering youth and family as our value, that looks like co-developing program changes with people who are using the systems today. Does that make sense? Okay. And then we're going to review outcomes from the program changes that we recommend or that are happening in the world, and say like, yeah, it's working, or no, it's not working, and we think it's because we're not training up right, or we're communicating weird about it. Like we are going to be a really problem-solving space that does kind of iterations. And then we can spit out little work groups like the state agency standing committee used to do, to dig into very specific problems. So where we used to do it around barriers that had been raised up from the local systems of care, this will be where we say, wow, there's a lot to know about this particular problem we're trying to solve, and we actually need some experts who aren't in this room. So we'll use this same charter form and create a work group charter that has who needs to be in the room, how long is it going to last, what is the work they're trying to do, and how will they communicate that back to us? Because as wise as this room is, there are thousands of things we don't know that need to be known to help us solve some of these problems. So we're going to figure out who those folks are and bring them to the table when it's appropriate. Does that make sense? Okay. Somebody moved on the screen. And then these are just the strategic action steps in our strategic plan, which Corinna put in the chat, that are sort of our specific work to own. So recruiting, retaining, supporting a respectful, responsive, and trauma-informed workforce. That's part of our job in this space. Creating programs and funding that support peer support. That is part of our job. Developing strategies to break down barriers to language assistance and making sure our services and supports are accessible from a linguistic standpoint is one of our roles. Implementing more school-based supports and services, decreasing barriers to respite services, decreasing barriers to access to intensive services, and creating a legislative review and feedback process that is youth and family led. That doesn't necessarily need to happen now, but having it up and running in time for the 2027 session would be the goal. Questions or comments about sort of our specific charge? And then Ebony, I know there were some things that you wanted to kind of talk about. Is now a good time, or do you want me to keep like talking through this? Selby. Somebody else talk for a minute. I'm sick of my voice.
Okay, well, and if you want Ebony or Selby, you kind of raise my hand as you were
Have at
calling
it.
out Ebony. So, no, this all looks really great. I guess one thing I was kind of curious about, understandably, the CCO, the Coordinated Care Organization Services contract is underneath Oregon Health Authority. But since you're kind of called out specifically things like the Rules Advisory Committees and the Legislative Watch, I didn't know if there would be kind of worthwhile to call out this idea of advocacy around different things we might wish to see or suggest for the CCO contract when they're reviewing that contract. So that was just one curiosity, or if that even fits here, or as we could presume is folded up under some of the other language.
I personally presume it's folded up under some of the other language, Selby. I think if we want to make a recommendation around the CCO contract language, that would probably be very specific to a problem that we're trying to solve, right? And so, it may be that if it's specific to like the local system of care portion of that contract, that might be a conversation that evolves with the local SOC coordinators, system of care coordinators, and then we bring it here as like, hey, we have some recommendations. Can the policy and program committee forward this on? Does that make sense? That we'd sort of use the power of this committee to push that conversation?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I wasn't thinking about the local system of care section in particular, but just that, you know, as we look at things like peer services and language access, like there's a lot of that is wrapped up in the CCO contract.
100%. Yeah. That makes good sense. And then Ebony, I was just calling you out because I was sick of hearing my own voice. If there's something you want to say, please do.
Yeah, no, and I, hopefully everyone has took a couple minutes to either glance at the executive summary. And remember that, one of my strengths is keeping us focused. And so as we think about the broader SOCAC strategic plan and thinking about kind of the 4 core goals as it relates to improving access, promoting the co-creation of equitable policies, creating sustainable infrastructure, and transforming the system, how do we also then think about directly and kind of also retain that muscle memory or develop the muscle memory around the broader strategic plan and how we know the plan is successful in terms of the outcomes around increased youth, increased percentage of youth reporting they have a safe place to go, a decreased percentage of youth have unmet mental health needs, decreased youth with substance use disorder. I'm not going to read all of them, but I think again, it's how do we remember how we're connected to the broader strategic plan. specific to SOCAC. And so with that, um, I don't know if it's me, if impatience or not. So I want to be strength-based, but I have reflected a lot in all my experience in stepping into new committees, and sometimes it feels like when you're starting a charter literally from scratch, you take almost 9 months to get to a starting point. And so I do appreciate Anna, you and the team, and how this charter has been informed, but we wanted to take a minute and just kind of, hear from you all in terms of what's resonating, what's at top of mind. Is there anything in the charter that you feel like is missing? And in that vein, too, the same thing in terms of the representation in terms of who's at the table. And again, this is our first opportunity in this revamp to practice bringing forward our voice, perspective, recommendation, and questions. And so I can talk a lot. I'm going to pause and be quiet and hand it over to y'all.
Would it help to go into a breakout room with like one other person and just get some time to look at this charter and talk it through with like one other person, and then come back and have that conversation after you've actually had a minute to like just quietly read it and maybe talk it through?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's
Nate's
use
down
the
for it.
random-
Ebony's down for it. I'm
Yes.
looking at our co-chair, Leah. Does that sound okay, or does that sound like awkward? Okay. All right.
Let's use the randomizer.
Exactly.
Sounds super awkward, but like also great. Let's do this.
I love awkward. Okay. Create. How many of us are there? 19. So we're going to create. How many is that?
19,
That's
so
eight rooms. One room's going to have 3 people.
Anna, if you can leave me out, I can stay in here in case anyone has to hop back into the meeting.
Okay.
I
Don't
was
push
gonna
the blue
say you
button.
don't need to add me.
No, you guys
there's
stop. Get to know people.
there's somebody just coming in actually right now. If you want to put them in from.
Oh, Acacia's here. Did you get assigned to a room, Acacia? You did. Okay, we are going to go into breakout. Oh, everybody's popping around. We're going into breakouts, Acacia, so that folks can read the committee charter and like talk it through with just like one other person. And then we'll come back and have like a little bit of a discussion. Oh, you don't have audio. Pusher?
No, just like for our room,
No, I know exactly. Like I
Yeah.
pushed the button, but if you want to push it first, you have at it, girl.
Okay, we're all over
We
it.
pushed our buttons.
We did push our buttons.
And I've started the recording again.
Thank you.
Welcome back. They have 22 seconds left to get into the middle of a really meaty, important conversation. All right, welcome back. I hope you got something out of that time. I know that Hillary had a couple of questions. Was it you, Hillary and Lacey? So let's just start with you, and then as that starts, other people's questioning minds might turn on, and y'all can just go ahead and raise hands. And Ebony and Leah, we will do our very best to answer those questions.
Okay, the first question was around the legislative work and how it fits with this committee, given it has a high membership of those from agencies. And so if it got to the stage of voting, etc., then the agency folks will almost definitely not be able to be, they're going to have to recuse themselves or not be voting. And so it just felt like how does that fit with the conflict of interest piece and agency pieces? And that again fits a little bit with the OARs. If the group is making recommendations, then if it's the agency folks, again, there may be some concerns around that. So that was the first thing we were talking about.
Yeah. So, in what we did this cycle, OAR means Oregon Administrative Rule. So for this cycle, we had like a legislative work group that was made up of just System of Care Advisory Council members. And so that's sort of how we jumped that conflict of interest hoop. I frankly, until we have a legislative review process that is youth and family led, I do not expect the council to run bills outside of things like cleaning up our own statutes. So it will be unlikely to see agency folks needing to take positions on system of care bills that impact the system of care unless we are solely specifically talking about the SOCAC, and it would be doubtful that that work would happen in this space. So I don't expect that to happen in 2027. With regard to OARs, I think where we identify that there are that's because it lives here in this OAR, we would decide how we wanted to address that. Do other folks want to dig in and make recommendations on how that OAR should be changed? Do we want to do that in a work group? Like, I think depending on what the OAR is and who owns that administrative rule, we'll figure out together how we want to proceed and protect somebody's conflict of interest. That's not a super direct answer, but that's what I'm getting.
Thank you. The other question was around, in it you put, in the purpose, you've put the following prioritized actions, but they didn't seem, they seem to be different from your, maybe the 4 things that we've seen as the prioritized things for the year. And so looking at that list, for instance, temporary lodging isn't one of those action items there, but it's stated as something that SOCAC wants to work on, and just kind of getting that feel for what is the focus of the work for this group, and what are some of the things that need to be there, and how does it fit with what you've written into the charter?
Yeah, so with regard to those 2 sort of priorities, which I will put into the chat, I personally believe that they are covered by all of the prioritized actions in the strategic plan. So decreasing barriers to access to intensive services is part of how we address temporary lodging, ensuring we have access to peer support, trauma-informed workforce, barriers to schools-based support services and supports, community-based care, right? Like all of those things connect to how do we decrease temporary lodging. So it's said differently, but it covers the same intentions.
And I'll just say, Hillary, from my perspective, one of the things that I can commit to as one of the co-chairs is always, kind of naming, those items that you just brought forward every so often as, a way to continue to make sure that we're, staying focused and grounded in kind of the purpose.
Makes sense. Those were my 2 big things. So over to somebody else.
Other folks who have questions?
There were a few points that came up in our group, and I'll just copy and paste the notes there into the chat. But largely looking at the implementation versus the advisory role and the capacity, there's a lot of language around implementation in the charter, and to what capacity do we have for implementation? and maybe specifying that in there. If otherwise, unless there is some clarification we'd like to offer in there. I pause there or go one after the other.
No, I mean, I think it'd be great. Like, let's talk quickly about implementation. And Lydia, was your same question? I'm sorry, my chat was covered up for a second. Was your same question Hillary, same question, or Anderson, same question?
It was
Lydia's BRB right now.
Oh, okay.
It was Hillary. Yeah.
Okay, so implementation. I mean, what I'm hoping, Anderson, and this could be wrong, so I'm looking at our agency friends and our provider friends, that these are the people who direct the work or who have colleagues who direct the work, right? So that as we're having these ideas and saying, like, what if we trade changing this thing, that they would be able to say, here's what those implementation challenges are going to be and what resources we would need to implement that, and then how that might play, right? That we have some of those experts in the room. So Lacey, Acacia, Jesse and Chelsea, right? That some of those agency people will be the ones who are able to say, like, yeah, that's doable, or sorry. And then take some level of responsibility for pushing their own system to get the work done.
I think that goes into just that next piece of just how the committees work together with those roles and responsibilities of how this subcommittee would work with the finance and data subcommittee as we have the different deliverables and different things like that. How would the work that we do be informed by the others and vice versa, so that we don't get potentially caught in the chicken versus the egg scenario? I think was
Great
what came up.
question. Let me show you what I hope will work. The intention is, and I know that this is really small, but this is our committee. So each of our different committees is down here of who's members and what roles are they seated in. And then here's each of our committee meetings, and what the executive committee is doing is outlining topics by date, and at each of our monthly executive committee meetings having the conversation of, oh, this came up in investment and finance and it really needs to get bumped over to program. We need program and policy to have an opinion or to be aware of, right? So that the executive committee space where all of our chairs sit is the place where that kind of cross communication is intended to happen. And then as that happens, we'll be filling out these topics by date. And I know they're really, really small, so that we can be making sure that the relevant committees are getting access to the relevant information as it moves through. And then the final decisions will be made at the full council level at the quarterly meetings. Does that like make sense to you, Anderson? Because if that doesn't make any sense, please help us do better.
That makes sense to me, and I think there are some follow-ups in the chat from Selby and Corin.
It'd be great to call it more explicitly or strongly in the roles and responsibilities for agency partners. SOCAC is advisory in scope, so we need the influence of agency partners to implement change. Great, Selby, we can draft some edits, and I know there's another comment about editing too, so we'll capture that in the notes and maybe come back with some changes from this conversation at the next meeting. And then how could barrier submission reports inform the work?
I could speak more to that context.
Sure.
Yeah, we talked a little bit in our group around the section here, assumptions, constraints, and risks. Essentially, this is a revised version of the State Agency Standing Committee. We will use similar format and strategy as before, relying on the barrier resolution model, but applying those strategies to priority projects identified in the strategic plan. I got really excited when I saw that as a system of care coordinator, a local system of care coordinator, because I think it's an opportunity to really create some kind of standardized language around how we use the barrier reports to inform policy option packages, or what Jesse had kind of described, and I really loved it, is like the gears within the systems that make change. So I just love like an opportunity to really unpack that language so that we could use it in our local systems of care as reasons to legitimize the barrier breaking process or the barrier resolution process, the continuation of the barrier submission reports. So would just love an opportunity to unpack that at a further meeting if possible.
Sure. And I think that there's maybe what that means to you and what that means internally to staff isn't the same. So that can be hard. But what we meant by that was when we identify a topic that needs a lot of intentional engagement and expertise that isn't in this room, that we would use the model we had used previously, where we bring that topic, had previously been something from the barriers, to this room and say, hey, here's a problem. Who should help solve it? Right? And we would do that with a topic like, hey, we're trying to, create a contract to resolve this problem. Who should help us figure out what needs to be in that contract? And then we would do a separate meeting, like the barrier resolution meetings, where the work happens outside of this and comes back to inform this, but not that we would actually be using those barrier reports. We have not been able to figure out how to get that data to be meaningful and comparable from system of care to system of care. And so the information that we receive in those reports, we've not been able to figure out a way to make it practically useful for us at the System of Care Advisory Council level.
I think your response kind of helped to address that next piece around policy in terms of how policy will land in this space, and what is our entry point into the conversation surrounding policy potentially, because I would imagine that would come up in those topics. But I think just, yeah.
Exactly that, Anderson, right? So like where one of these topics is, oh, there's a law that says this thing has to happen in this way, and that actually makes it not possible for us to solve this problem. We would want to have a conversation about, do we want to push for legislative change? If it's an administrative rule, or if it's just like a practice, right? It may be a local policy and not necessarily something that's statewide, right? So we would try to dig in and find out what are the rules that are causing the problem, if it's a rule that's causing the problem, and who has the authority to make that change, and then how do we sort of direct our recommendations to that appropriate body.
Cool. And I was just acting as sort of I was the note taker for my breakout rooms. That encompasses the folks in my group.
Cool. Thank you so much. Other questions or things that you found that you were like, I don't quite understand how this is supposed to work? This is like really helpful for me. I'm not great at writing charters, so this was my first charter. Could there be a section in how we will get work done that could lay out, in the charter called How We Will Get Work Done, and it could lay out how we will intersect with other SOCAC subcommittees, how we'll follow the work topics being assigned by the executive committee? Well, Selby, that lives in a different document.
Okay. I was just thinking you provided a verbal explanation to some of the questions we had in our small group, but those could those just be written in this charter was the question.
Gotcha. Let me see if that document actually lives online. Corinna, do you know if the council committee structure document lives on the internet?
I don't think we've put that on there yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we have heard your concern or your question, and we will figure out a way to resolve it, Selby.
Oh, then can I just add super quick, while we're on this topic, Alex, I feel like this kind of had a little bit of a through line from my perspective in terms of what you brought forward. So I don't know if there's anything else that you would want to add or raise specific, because I felt like this is a little bit connected to kind of the point that you were making.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of the proper charter word, but I think it's definition of done. And I brought up during our breakout session is how do we decide that something has been accomplished? And I think this fits into Anderson's point too about implementation, as that could be a gray area as well. But I think there's a lot of topics that this committee could tackle that have clear endpoints. Policy is created or so forth. But when it comes to things that are more elaborate, like respite care, there seems to be a need for quantitative analysis rather than qualitative voting. And I think also adding a definition of done and the procedural way in which we all decide something has been accomplished adds to that confidence of the community, building that confidence in systems that the group is trying to accomplish as well. So I was just kind of contemplating how how topics rise, are there decision matrix to also identify the top priorities, as there's a great whirlwind of topics that could arise within the priorities as well. I think, did I capture all that, Ebony? Thank you.
I mean, I think it is it's going to be like context specific. Don't you, like in terms of like what is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the scope in which we would decide? Like that might be part of how we define like here's the problem and here's how we would define resolution, right? Like what does resolved mean? Was this old problem we had? I mean, we literally spent like months trying to talk about how we define the word resolved when it comes to barriers. And so I think what we need to do as a committee is like decide for each problem we're trying to solve, how would we define solved? Because there's always going to be iterative improvements that we would want to continue to make, right? So is it that the policy got passed, or is that just the very beginning of solving the problem? And then what would that look like continuing down into implementation and those things? And Jesse, I see your comment, but I want to go to Debbie, and then we'll pick up your comment in the chat.
I think I was just looking over the charter. One thing that kind of jumped out for me is just on the outcomes and the deliverables of either timelines to deliver those, or what is the end goal. So policy recommendation, well, does that mean to every agency, or we need to have 5, or we just need to have some recommendations, whatever it is, by a certain date? So just some of that, and it could be just that we don't know what we don't know yet. But some of that, like of where is the marker that we're looking to get to know that we've delivered that that item.
Got you. Okay. I think this is helpful. I mean, as I'm sort of thinking about this space, it is sort of just a like we do this work forever, right? And from time to time, we issue policy change recommendations, right? Like they're not, that is not so specific to one action or one sort of cycle. But if it is helpful for us to break our work into chunks and cycles like that, that might be something that we want to really kind of consider, because then we could look at, are we achieving our goals at this committee? We have Cody in here, and he's our data analyst, and what he's really trying to track is how the work that happens here helps us accomplish the outcomes in the SOCAC strategic plan. And so for me, that's where this work is really going, is like, how are we getting to these results and outcomes, which are number of youth reporting that they have a safe place to go outside of school increases in the state of Oregon per the Student Health Survey. The number of youth who are identifying they have an unmet mental health care need per the Student Health Survey goes down, right? So like those are the big like system outcomes that we're looking at. There's a whole pile of them. I'm not going to read them out to you. But that in my head is like the long-term goal. It feels like what I'm hearing from a number of you is that we also want some shorter-term goals for this committee to know, like, are we the puzzle piece that's actually helping accomplish that larger vision? And so we could talk about that, committee chairs, and think about how we might want to break this up. Does that feel okay to you? I'm looking at you. Okay. Okay, great. Cody?
Just going to follow up pretty briefly on the metrics. We have a combination of process measures and outcomes measures. And so a lot of our short-term measures are, did we do something that will eventually lead to the outcome? And a lot of our long-term measures are, did that actually result in healthier lives for kids? We have a lot more detail on those within the actual strategic plan. But as far as activities from this group, it's going to lead more towards process, at least in the short term. And then eventually that will hopefully lead to better outcomes for our kiddos.
Yeah, I for sure understand the big picture of that. Absolutely. And ultimately that is what it's a subcommittee. So it's meant to support the work of the committee. And also I've been on a lot of subcommittees that are like the evergreen subcommittees that are just constantly going. And sometimes you can get lost in what are we accomplishing right now? And so I think it's also good to have some markers of accomplishment for the group to hang on to.
Super helpful. Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah.
And Jesse, is there more? You're saying timeline seems vague to me. We just kind of had a conversation about that. Is there anything more you want to talk about in relationship to that? Okay.
Nope.
And then Leah, we've experienced where someone thinks the thing is solved because we did another thing. Yeah. Monique, how do we know if we are addressing all the people who are impacted by the barrier? Do you want to say anything about that?
I think it just in listening to you talk about some of these particular um, areas that we would be focusing on. For example, you talked about intensive services and how that impacts kids who might be at risk for hoteling, but there's also another large population of individuals who are impacted by not having access to intensive services, like kids with dual diagnoses and kids who may or may not be able to, you know, access particular care based on location. I don't know. There's so many, you know. Um, Another one example was just like respite, you know, how we've talked about in other committees, respite impacts disability services, respite impacts kids in child welfare, child, you know, kids with mental health issues. How do we know that we're addressing the needs of all those populations and not just the one that's being thought of as this has been written, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So we have, and I think we should probably dig into it at some point, an equity strategy, and we have some prioritized populations, and those populations are data based on the folks who are historically have the hardest time accessing services in Oregon. And Cody, if I screw this up, hopefully you're ready to correct me. It's youth who are experiencing homelessness or houselessness. It is youth who live in rural communities, youth with intellectual developmental disabilities. Cody, what are the other two? I know there's five.
I don't have them off the top of my head, so I
Oh
can't
man.
correct you
Okay,
until
well
I
then let
look
me
them
open
up.
it up. I just had it. So we have, it's in our equity procedure, it's built into our equity procedure, that we would look at those prioritized populations, Monique, and sort of we're going to have to acknowledge that as we make progress in one space, we probably won't be able to solve the whole problem at one time for every population. But if we are making progress and we're continuing to focus on those who have historically had the most barriers, we should be removing more barriers for people than if we're focusing on just those who have like the louder voices or the advocates with more time on their hands or whatever the thing is.
And I think the reality is the systems who can access systems with the most resources and how some people have that ability based on diagnosis or whatever, right? And others really can't access those services.
Exactly. And that's part of why we have this very I mean, depending on how you define diversity, right? But we have a diverse room from the standpoint of different perspectives and different life experiences. And so the intent is that as people are surfacing solutions, that they're surfacing solutions that work for folks who they have personal experience partnering with, being with in community, whatever, so that we're able to really consider that and that we can ideally use our equity procedure to name like, oh, we've got a gap here. We actually need to go out. We have now a process for doing a focus group to invite people in for whom we don't have a relationship with all that much and say, we're working on a question like this. Do you have suggestions or ideas that we would then bring into this room as well? So it won't be perfect. I don't believe perfect exists in this world, but it might be pretty good. That's the goal. And then I do want to put in this, the Hillary kind of referenced it, and I think Ebony referenced it as well. So this statement of what our priority focuses are as a council in 2026. So the first one is reducing temporary lodging by 50% by increasing access to residential treatment beds, decreasing boarding and emergency rooms, and increasing complex care coordination, and then expanding access to community-based care. So in expanding access to in-home services and supports for substance use disorder treatment, expanding the capacity of in-home providers to serve people with developmental disabilities and those with substance use disorders, school-based services, and access to respite. So those are the topics that I think Hillary and Ebony were referencing in case you are not reading as many of our documents. Okay, so we have 4 minutes left. I don't know, chairs, are there questions that you have to direct how you want to push and pull me to do better as I staff you? Or other ways you want to finish out this meeting?
No, I think that I'm just excited about the new strategic plan and the framing and the focus that it's going to bring Just appreciate, everyone's engagement. And, I think all of the questions were very thoughtful and important. I just quite frankly, I'm excited for this next iteration and just in working in partnership with Leah, committed to just continuing to do all that we can to really make sure that this is a space where y'all feel like your voice is not only heard, but it's clear in terms of how your voice and who you represent is impacting the work and the deliverables as a result of this. And so I think that this was a really good first meeting. So thank you, and I'll hand it to Leah.
Thank you, Ebony, and ditto to what she said. But I also wanted to just thank everybody for, for stepping into this space and taking the time to, to do this hard work on this side of the kind of bigger SOCAC spectrum, because there's a lot of people in this room with a lot of expertise in a lot of different places, and that's how the work gets done, right? So I just really appreciate that. I appreciate that everybody stepped into it.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll be back next month. If you have questions or comments in the meantime, my inbox is open 24/7. Hope you are well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.